The void of space trembled with the arrival of the Vornak fleet. A sea of warships, each a fortress of destruction, emerged from the blackness like specters of an unstoppable doom. Hundreds of vessels, their hulls covered in the scars of countless battles, formed a wall of overwhelming force. They did not sneak or maneuver with caution, no. The Vornak did not know the meaning of subtlety. They arrived with fire and fury, confident that this world, like all before it, would fall beneath their might. For decades, their conquests had been absolute. They struck without mercy, crushing all who stood before them. To them, war was not a contest. It was a simple equation of strength. Their empire had grown across the stars through relentless expansion, devouring planets and civilizations alike. The weak submitted. The defiant burned. It was the way of things, a truth they had written in the blood of those who dared resist. And so, when they set their sights on Epsilon Prime, a human colony resting at the edge of the galactic frontier, they expected the same tired routine. The humans would either flee in terror, or they would muster a fleet to die with honor. Either way, it would end the same. But when their fleet arrived, there was no armada waiting for them. No desperate fleet strung together in a last, futile defense. There was only one ship. It sat in the vastness of space, a lone sentinel standing against the darkness. The Indomitable, a single human warship. It was impossible, laughable even. The Vornak had never faced a force so pitifully small. Their fleet stretched across the horizon like a wall of doom, their capital ships bristling with weapons capable of reducing continents to rubble. The Indomitable was a mere speck in comparison, a lone defiant soul staring down an army. On the bridge of the human ship, Commander Elliot West watched the tactical display with steady, unblinking eyes. Around him, his officers remained silent, their expressions carved from stone. Every single one of them understood what they faced. The enemy fleet outnumbered them by an impossible margin. Hundreds of warships, each one larger, stronger, and more advanced than their own, stood ready to tear them apart. The rational mind said they had no chance, and yet, the Indomitable did not flee, because to flee was to surrender, and humans did not surrender. For a moment, the void stood still. The Vornak, arrogant and unchallenged for centuries, hesitated. They did not fear the Indomitable itself. No, they feared something else, something deeper, something primal. They feared what? It meant humans had never fought like other species. Their wars were not decided by numbers or sheer firepower. They fought with something else, something that could not be calculated or predicted. They adapted. They learned. And when faced with impossible odds, they refused to fall. The Vornak. Commander Kraln stared at the human vessel with growing unease. His instincts, sharpened by decades of war, whispered that something was wrong. He had faced enemies who resisted before, but none like this. There was no frantic call for reinforcements, no desperate attempt to stall for time. Just that single ship waiting in the abyss. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. Kraln clenched his jaw and pushed the thought aside. No hesitation, no fear. The battle would be over in moments. He raised his hand in a sharp motion. "Advance," he ordered. The Vornak fleet surged forward, massive warships drifting through the void like silent behemoths. Weapon systems charged, targeting computers locked onto the human ship. In mere moments, they would unleash devastation upon the Indomitable, wiping it from existence before it had a chance to act. And yet, on the human ship, there was no panic. No last-minute attempt to flee. Inside the Indomitable, the bridge was silent. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the tactical displays. The crew was focused, unshaken. They had trained for this moment, not to survive, but to strike. "Bring up the tactical overlay," West said, his voice calm. The room dimmed as a massive holographic display materialized, revealing the enemy fleet's formation. Cold, red indicators marked each hostile warship, a sea of crimson filling the projection. The Vornak had come expecting an execution. What they didn't know, what they could never have predicted, was that the Indomitable had never intended to fight on their terms. West allowed himself a small smile. Let's show them what one ship can do. The Vornak fleet moved as one, a monolithic tide of destruction rolling through the void. Each warship was a testament to their empire's philosophy: size, strength, and brute force. Their battle doctrines were simple: overwhelm, dominate, and annihilate. Against a proper enemy, they would have spread their formation, deploying flanking ships to cut off any escape while their capital vessels rained destruction from afar. But this was not a battle. It was an execution. Kraln watched from the command throne of his flagship, the Vorthal, a dreadnought so vast it cast a shadow across the battlefield even in the emptiness of space. The ship had led invasions across a dozen systems, bringing worlds to their knees, and now it would wipe this human ship from existence. His officers stood in anticipation, awaiting the order that would turn the Indomitable into little more than a debris field. "Commander," one of his lieutenants said, voice edged with curiosity, "the human vessel is not transmitting a distress signal. It has not activated any escape pods. There is no attempt to surrender." Crown's brow furrowed, his mandibles tightening. Why would they not attempt to save themselves? Even the proudest warrior races they had crushed in the past had sent final pleas to their governments, their families. Even the most foolish had at least tried to negotiate. But this ship, this single ship, it simply waited. No matter. It would be over soon. Charge plasma batteries. "Prepare to fire," Crown ordered. Across the Vornak fleet, massive turrets shifted, their barrels glowing with the telltale energy of charged plasma cannons. These weapons were designed to tear through planetary defenses, to reduce cityscapes into molten wastelands with a single volley. Against a lone warship, the power they were about to unleash was excessive, borderline wasteful, but Kraln saw no reason to show restraint. Inside the Indomitable, the countdown had begun. Commander Elliot, West stood at the heart of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. The holographic tactical display reflected in his eyes, showing a sea of red converging on their position. Hundreds of targeting locks painted the ship from all angles, their automated systems marking them as doomed prey. But West? He wasn't afraid. "Time to impact?" he asked. 20 seconds until full fleet volley," his tactical officer replied. "Shields?" "Online, but they won't hold against that much firepower. Not for long." "Good," West said, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Let them think we're just standing here. Helm, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Pattern Omega-7. Tactical, activate countermeasures on my mark. Weapons, hold fire." There was a slight hesitation among the officers, but not one of fear. They trusted their commander. The crew of the Indomitable had trained for every scenario imaginable. They knew exactly what was coming, and they knew exactly what they had to do. From the outside, the Indomitable still hadn't moved. It was a death sentence. Crown watched, satisfaction blooming in his chest. Fire. The void ignited. A wall of plasma surged forward, an apocalyptic storm of energy cutting through the darkness. The sheer force of the barrage warped the very fabric of space around it. The first wave would hit in seconds, and yet, as the firestorm closed in, something happened. The Indomitable moved. Not a panicked retreat, not a desperate scramble for safety. No, its movements were precise, calculated. As if the crew had known exactly when and where the Vornak would fire. At the last possible moment, the human warship surged forward, twisting through the void with an agility that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. The plasma bolts that should have annihilated it missed by mere meters, the ship rolling between the fiery explosions like a knife slipping through the cracks of a closing fist. Crown leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Impossible. The humans had predicted. Their attack pattern. More than that, they were using the very design of the Vornak fleet against them. The enemy's ships were massive, their formations tight to maintain fleet cohesion. Plasma bolts that missed the Indomitable didn't simply vanish, they slammed into the ships behind it. Explosions rippled through the fleet as their own weapons tore into their defenses. Shields overloaded, smaller escort ships vaporized under The friendly fire and confusion spread like wildfire among the Vornak ranks. "Commander, our ships are taking damage from misfires," a panicked officer reported. Crown bared his teeth. "Adjust targeting. Spread the formation." "Too late," another officer interrupted. "The human ship is closing the distance." Crown's head snapped back to the display. The Indomitable was no longer stationary. It was moving. Not away from the fleet, not toward safety, but directly into their formation. This was not an act of desperation. This was a plan. Inside the human warship, West's voice remained steady. "Engage jamming systems, disrupt their targeting." And now, his eyes gleamed. Weapons free. The Indomitable came alive. From its hull, missile hatches snapped open, railgun turrets adjusted their aim, and beams of concentrated energy flared into existence. The ship fired, not randomly, not chaotically, but with terrifying precision. Every shot found a weak point. Every missile struck an exposed system. The Vornak fleet had expected to rain destruction upon a defenseless target. Instead, they had let a predator into their midst. Vornak warships erupted in fire, chain reactions spreading as their own munitions stores were hit. Escort ships were torn apart, their shielding useless against the surgical brutality of human weaponry. Even the larger battleships meant to endure siege-level assaults found themselves crumbling. Panic spread. The Vornak fleet, once a wall of unbreakable might, was reeling. And in the heart of the chaos, the Indomitable moved like a phantom, never where it was expected, always one step ahead. For the first time in Crown's long, victorious career, he felt fear. His fleet had not encountered a fool's last stand. They had not found a desperate act of defiance. They had walked into a trap. The Vornak fleet was in chaos. Crown's flagship, the Vorthal, trembled as secondary explosions rippled through the nearby vessels. The Vornak were no strangers to battle, but this was something else. This wasn't just an ambush. This was a massacre, except they were the ones being torn apart. "Status!" Krallen barked, his voice sharp as steel. Multiple escort-class vessels destroyed. 3 battleships critically damaged. "Shields across the fleet are fluctuating due to interference from our own weapons fire," a lieutenant reported, his voice laced with disbelief. "Commander, the human vessel. It's inside our formation. We can't get a clear lock on it." Krallen's claws gripped the arms of his command throne so tightly the metal creaked under the pressure. His mind raced. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The battle should have been over already. The humans were primitive, inferior in every measurable way. Their empire was young, their fleets were small, their technology was decades behind. Vornak engineering. And yet this one ship was dismantling his forces, as if it had always known how they would react. He turned to his chief strategist. "How are they predicting our movements?" The strategist's mandibles twitched, a rare sign of uncertainty. They must have studied our battle doctrines extensively, but that alone wouldn't explain this level of precision. He hesitated, then added, "It's almost as if they know what we're going to do before we do it." Krallen's scowl deepened. Impossible. The Vornak Empire had crushed species far more advanced than these humans. How could a lone ship outmaneuver a fleet that had conquered entire star systems? But down on the human ship's bridge, Commander Elliot West knew. He had studied the Vornak for years. He had memorized their formations, their tactics, their pride. The Vornak always fought the same way. Overwhelming force, crushing numbers, predictable battle formations. And that was their weakness. They were too rigid, too reliant on the belief that no one could outthink them. The Indomitable wasn't just fighting. It was rewriting the battle. West's eyes never left the tactical display. The battlefield was a swirling mess of debris and fire. But to him, it was a chessboard. He saw every opening, every misstep, every hesitation in the enemy ranks. "They're adjusting formation," his tactical officer said. "Trying to spread out." "Too late," West murmured. "We already forced them into their own kill zone. Helm, bring us around. 45-degree vector, starboard thrust. Tactical, prepare a railgun volley at these coordinates." He tapped several points on the display. "Their capital ships still have overlapping fields of fire. If we hit the right spots, they'll finish the job for us." His weapons officer grinned. "Firing solution locked in. Fire. The Indomitable let loose another precise, ruthless barrage. 3 hyper-accelerated tungsten slugs ripped through the void at near-relativistic speeds, striking a Vornak battleship at its weakest structural points. The impact alone would have been catastrophic, but West had aimed for something even more devastating. The shots punched through the battleship's primary fusion core containment system. A split second later, the core destabilized. The explosion was colossal. A miniature sun erupted within the heart of the Vornak formation as the battleship detonated from within, sending out a shockwave of molten debris and high-energy plasma. Several nearby Vornak ships, unable to react in time, were caught in the blast. Their shields buckled, their armor melted, and within moments, 2 more warships were obliterated. The Vornak were destroying themselves. Kraln's eyes widened as the tactical display flashed red with casualty reports. How? How was this happening? He slammed a fist into his armrest. Enough! His officers flinched. The human ship is one vessel, one ship against our entire fleet. I don't care what tricks they're using. I want it gone. Scramble all remaining strike squadrons. Bring up our energy barriers to maximum output and target every weapon system they have. His voice was a growl of barely contained rage. And if that fails, ram them if you have to. At his command, dozens of Vornak fighters swarmed into the battle, streaking toward the Indomitable like a cloud of vengeful wasps. These were the best pilots the Empire had to offer, their ships faster and more maneuverable than any human vessel. West saw them coming. He didn't flinch. Deploy countermeasures. Let's see if they can fight what they can't see. A series of rapid electromagnetic pulses pulsed outward from the Indomitable, scrambling the Vornak targeting systems. Pilots suddenly found their sensors useless, their weapons unable to lock onto their target. Their formations broke apart as they struggled to reorient themselves. And that was all the opening the Indomitable needed. Its point defense turrets came alive, spitting out streams of hypervelocity rounds that cut through the blinded enemy fighters. Like a scythe through wheat, explosions bloomed across the battlefield as the Vornak squadrons were torn apart before they even had a chance to strike. Kraln watched in horror. Every move he made, every tactic he deployed, it was like the humans had already planned for it. His Empire's war doctrine had always been simple. Overwhelm them before they can resist. But for the first time, the Vornak were not fighting a battle on their own terms. For the first time, they were the ones outmatched. For the first time, they feared. On the bridge of the Indomitable, West exhaled slowly, watching as the enemy fleet struggled to regain cohesion. He tapped his communicator. Engineering, status on the kinetic payload? Ready to fire on your command, sir, came the response. Good. West straightened. His crew had fought flawlessly. The Vornak fleet was wounded, disoriented, and afraid. Now, it was time to break them. Prepare the main rail cannon, he ordered. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the bridge, with absolute authority. Target their flagship. We're about to show them how a real war is fought. The Indomitable turned, aligning itself with the Vorthal, the massive dreadnought that sat at the center of the Vornak fleet. Kraln's eyes widened as alarms flared across his command console. He could feel it. The humans were about to strike. With everything they had, for the first time in his life, he was the one being hunted. And Commander West? He knew the battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned, and there was no going back. Kraln had never experienced fear before. Not truly. The Vornak did not fear. They conquered, subjugated, and annihilated. It was their way, their right, their legacy. But now, as he stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet unravel at the hands of a single human warship, an emotion he had no name for began to take root in the pit of his chest. This is impossible. Yet the impossible was happening right before his eyes. His fleet, his unstoppable armada, was supposed to crush the human defenders and sweep through this sector unchallenged. This mission was meant to be a demonstration of Vornak supremacy, a message to the Terran Republic that resistance was futile. Instead, the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of his own ships, burning against the black void like funeral pyres. And at the center of it all was the Indomitable, a lone Terran warship that refused to die. Commander, the human vessel is locking onto us. The panicked cry of his tactical officer sent a shiver down Crown's spine. He turned sharply toward the main viewport, where the sleek, deadly silhouette of the Indomitable was now aligning itself with the Vorthal. He barely had time to react before the first shot struck. A tungsten slug, fired from the Indomitable's primary rail cannon at near-light speeds, tore through space and slammed into the dreadnought's forward hull with unimaginable force. The kinetic impact alone was enough to crumple reinforced armor plating, sending a ripple of destruction deep into the ship's structure. Secondary explosions cascaded along the outer decks as energy capacitors ruptured and crew members were sucked into the vacuum of space. Crown staggered as the Vorthal trembled beneath him. Damage alarms shrieked, the bridge lights flickered. Smoke filled the air as control panels sparked and overloaded. "Return fire," he roared. "We can't get a lock, Commander." "His weapons," officer cried. "Their jamming field is scrambling our targeting systems." Crown snarled, his patience snapping. "Then fire manually. Blind fire if you have to. I want that ship destroyed." But even as his crew scrambled to obey, Crown knew it wouldn't matter. He had underestimated the humans. He had thought them weak, but they had studied him. They had anticipated his every move, forced his ships into vulnerable positions, weaponized his own fleet against itself. And now, the humans weren't just fighting, they were hunting. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Elliot West observed the destruction with cold, calculated precision. His face was unreadable, his mind moving faster than any of his crew could perceive. The Vorthal was wounded, its armor shattered, its defenses buckling. But it wasn't dead. Not yet. And that was a problem. "Helm. Adjust trajectory," West ordered, his voice steady. "Bring us in closer. Tactical, prepare another railgun volley. This time, target their secondary reactor core, right here." He marked a location on the tactical display, pinpointing a critical structural weak spot within the dreadnought's damaged hull. "They won't survive a hit there." His weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, if we move any closer, we'll be within range of their remaining point defenses." West didn't blink. "We're already within range, but they won't hit us." The officer swallowed hard, but nodded. He knew better than to doubt West's instincts. The Indomitable surged forward, weaving effortlessly through the debris field left behind by the fallen Vornak ships. Automated turrets along the Vorthal's hull tried desperately to lock onto the human warship, spitting out rapid bursts of plasma fire. But the Indomitable moved like a ghost, its engines flaring in quick, unpredictable bursts, shifting directions, faster than the sluggish Vornak targeting computers could compensate. The shots missed, every single one, and then the human warship struck again. The second railgun round hit its mark with devastating precision. This time, the damage was absolute. The tungsten slug tore into the Vorthal's secondary reactor chamber, piercing the containment field and igniting a catastrophic chain reaction. The dreadnought convulsed as explosions ripped through its decks, tearing apart bulkheads, rupturing fuel lines, and triggering violent decompressions throughout the ship. Inside, Vornak crew members were thrown from their stations, their bodies flung against walls as fire and shrapnel consumed them. Kraln barely managed to hold on to his command chair as the ship shook apart beneath him. "Commander!" an officer screamed. "The ship is—" A final explosion cut his words short as the reactor detonated. For a split second, the Vorthal burned brighter than a dying star. Then, it was gone. The flagship of the Vornak fleet, reduced to a cloud of expanding debris. Silence filled the bridge of the Indomitable. The crew stared at the main viewport, watching as the explosion faded, leaving behind only drifting wreckage, where the most powerful ship in the Vornak armada had once been. West exhaled slowly. "Status?" "Enemy flagship destroyed," his tactical officer confirmed, his voice laced with disbelief. "The remaining ships, they're breaking formation, they're retreating." West nodded once. He had expected as much. The Vornak were ruthless, but they weren't suicidal. With their leader dead and their command structure in disarray, they had lost their will to fight. "They never thought they'd lose," West murmured. His second-in-command turned to him. "Sir, what are your orders?" West watched as the remaining Vornak ships fled, their engines burning bright as they abandoned the battlefield. He could have ordered a pursuit. He could have finished them off. But he didn't need to. The message had already been sent. The Vornak had come expecting an easy victory. They had thought a single human warship would be insignificant against their grand armada. But they had been wrong, and now the entire galaxy would know it. West straightened. Stand down from combat alert. Begin recovery operations. He turned, locking eyes with his crew. And send a transmission back to Terran Command. What should we tell them, sir? West's lips curled into a grim smile. Tell them. The battle is over. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The Vornak would not forget this day, and neither would humanity. The battlefield was quiet now. Where once there had been the deafening roar of railgun fire, the crackling inferno of exploding warships, and the frenzied cries of battle, now there was only silence. The wreckage of the Vornak fleet drifted lifelessly, shattered hulls tumbling through the void, their twisted metal reflecting the distant light of a nearby star. Among them, the remains of the Vorthal, once the pride of the Vornak armada, were nothing more than glowing fragments, cooling in the vast emptiness of space. The Indomitable floated amidst the destruction, like a lone sentinel, its hull scorched and battered, but still intact, still standing and still watching. On the bridge, Commander Elliot West stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. The last of the retreating Vornak ships had long since vanished into the void, their engines burning hard as they fled beyond human-controlled space. They had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had been routed, forced into a humiliating retreat by a single Terran warship. It was a victory. A decisive, resounding, undeniable victory, but West knew better than to celebrate just yet. Damage report, he ordered. Lieutenant Cade, the ship's chief engineer, rubbed his forehead as he scanned his console. We took some hits, but nothing critical. The hull's holding. Starboard shielding is down to 23%, and we lost one of our maneuvering thrusters during the last engagement. But overall, we're still in fighting shape. West gave a small nod. The Indomitable had endured worse before. It would endure again. Casualties? A somber pause. Then, Cade exhaled. 17 confirmed dead. Another 36 wounded. Most of them were in the lower decks when we took that last plasma strike. Medbay is handling triage now. West closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. 17. 17 lives lost in the defense of a world that had no idea how close it had come to annihilation. 17 people who had stood against the tide and paid the price. And for what? To delay the inevitable? Because that's what this was. A delay. He knew it, even if no one else wanted to say it. The Vornak had suffered a humiliating defeat today, but they would not forget. They would not forgive. They would return, and next time they wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating humanity. They would come back stronger, angrier, and when they did, the Terran Republic would have to be ready. Commander, a voice called from across the bridge, pulling West from his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Soren, his communications officer. She was frowning at her display, fingers tapping rapidly as she adjusted the signal channels. We're picking up a transmission, she said. Encoded, but not Vornak. It's coming from outside the system. West's brow furrowed. Human? Soren hesitated. That's the thing, sir. It's not Terran military, and it's not a civilian. Distress signal either. The encryption pattern. It doesn't match anything in our database. West felt a chill crawl down his spine. Unknown signals were never a good sign. Not out here. Put it through, he ordered. Let's hear it. There was a moment of static, then a voice, distorted and faint, crackling through the bridge speakers. Indomitable. Do you copy? Repeat. This is... The transmission broke into garbled noise, then cleared again. Listening post, Echo 1-3. Urgent priority. They're coming. West's pulse quickened. Clarify. Who's coming? The voice on the other end was uneven, frantic. The Vornak fleet. The real fleet. This was just a vanguard. They were testing your defenses. The main invasion force is already on the way. And Commander, a pause, a sharp, ragged breath. They're not alone. A heavy silence settled over the bridge. West exchanged glances with his officers, reading the same unease on their faces that was twisting in his gut. The Vornak weren't alone? What did that mean? All at once, the weight of the battle they had just fought, the victory they had claimed, felt different, smaller, less like an end, and more like a beginning. West straightened. His voice was steady when he spoke. "How long do we have?" The voice on the other end hesitated. Then, days. Maybe less. The signal cut out. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Cade exhaled sharply, breaking the silence. "Well, that's just fantastic." West ignored the remark, his mind already racing through the implications. If this was true, if the Vornak had sent only a vanguard while the real invasion force was still en route, then this wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a war, and the Terran Republic wasn't ready for it. He turned back toward the bridge's main viewport, staring out into the blackness of space. Somewhere beyond the darkness, an armada was already moving. An overwhelming force, greater than anything humanity had faced before, marching toward them with only one objective: to finish what the vanguard had started. And if the Indomitable had barely survived this battle, what chance would Earth have against the true might of the Vornak Empire? West clenched his jaw. The answer was clear. Not much, unless humanity did something about it. For a long moment, the bridge of the Indomitable was silent. The weight of the message hung over them like an executioner's blade. The battle they had fought, the desperate stand they had made, it had been nothing more than a test, a prelude. And now, the real war was about to begin. Commander Elliot West turned slowly, scanning the faces of his bridge crew. He saw grim determination in some, quiet fear in others. But they were all waiting for him, waiting for their next move. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. Then, his voice was calm. "Steady. Bring up the star map. I want every known Vornak fleet movement from the last 5 years cross-referenced with recent subspace activity. We need to know where they're coming from." Lieutenant Soren's hands were already moving across her console. Within moments, the holographic star map above the bridge flickered to life, spreading out in a sea of glowing constellations, lines of movement, points of engagement, shattered colonies. Each marker told a story, a warning, written in the blood, of civilizations that had come before them. And there, just beyond the outer edges of human space, was the answer. A massive energy surge, moving in the dark, swallowing the distance between them at an alarming speed. A fleet. No, an armada. Hundreds of warships, battleships the size of cities, dreadnoughts equipped with enough firepower to reduce entire planets to ash. Their formation was deliberate, methodical. This was not a reckless attack. This was an extermination force. Soren exhaled, barely above a whisper. "They're bringing everything." Cade, the ship's chief engineer, leaned forward, studying the data. "This can't be right. They're moving too fast. How the hell are they covering this much ground? Even with their best FTL drives, this shouldn't be possible." West's gaze narrowed. That was the question, wasn't it? The Vornak were dangerous, but they weren't invincible. Their fleet technology had limitations. They couldn't just appear, out of nowhere, unless... A cold realization settled in his gut. "They have help," he murmured. A ripple of tension passed through the bridge. Soren looked up. "Sir?" West straightened. His voice was sharper now. "The message said they weren't alone. We assumed that meant reinforcements. But what if it's worse than that? What if they're using technology that isn't their own? Something faster. Something better." Cade swore under his breath. "If that's true, then we don't just have a Vornak problem. We've got an unknown variable, and that's a hell of a lot worse." West turned back to the map. He could feel the pressure building, the weight of command settling on his shoulders. Had fought battles before. He had led men and women into the fire and brought them back. But this was different. Humanity was outnumbered, outgunned, outpaced, but they weren't out of options. Not yet. West turned to Soren. "Get me a secure line to Fleet Command, now." She hesitated. "Sir, we're still outside standard communication range. It'll take time to then boost the damn signal. If we don't warn them now, there won't be anything left to warn. Soren didn't argue. She turned back to her console, fingers flying over the controls. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Then, "Commander," she said, voice tight. "We have a connection, but it's weak. There's interference." West didn't care. It was enough. Patch it through. The screen at the front of the bridge flickered, then resolved into an image of Admiral Grant, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Terran Republic Navy. His face was lined with exhaustion, his uniform disheveled. He had the look of a man who had been fighting wars for far too long. "Commander West," Grant said, his voice rough with static. "I don't have time for—" "Sir," West cut in. "We have a situation." He didn't wait for permission. He laid it out. Everything. The battle, the transmission, the fleet that was coming, the unknown technology that was accelerating their approach. By the time he finished, the tension on Grant's face had deepened into something even graver. "How long?" the Admiral asked. "Days," West said. "Maybe less." Grant exhaled sharply. "Damn it. We knew the Vornak were building up for something, but this—" He shook his head. "We don't have the forces to hold them off, not if they're coming in those numbers. Earth's fleet is spread thin. We're barely holding the line in half a dozen systems as it is." West's grip tightened behind his back. He had expected as much, but hearing it confirmed didn't make it any easier. "Then we need a plan," he said. "Because if that fleet reaches us unchallenged, humanity is finished." Grant's jaw tightened. "Agreed." A beat of silence passed between them. Then, the Admiral's gaze sharpened. "We need intelligence. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. If they've got new tech, if they're moving faster than they should be. We need to understand why. And that means someone has to get closer." West understood instantly. "You want me to take the Indomitable in?" Grant's voice was grim. "You're the only one in position to do it. We don't have another ship in range that can intercept them in time. If you can slip past their outer defenses and gather data on their fleet composition, weapons, and whatever new drive system they're using, we might have a chance to mount a proper defense." West felt the weight of it settle on him. A lone warship, already battle-worn, going headfirst into the storm. But he didn't hesitate. "You'll have your intel, sir." Grant gave a small nod. "Good luck, Commander. We're counting on you." The transmission cut out. Silence filled the bridge once more. West turned back to his crew. "You heard the Admiral," he said. "We've got a mission." There was no hesitation, no argument, because they all knew what was at stake. Earth was in danger, and the Indomitable was the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. West exhaled. "Set course," he ordered. "We're going in." The engines roared to life. The Indomitable turned toward the darkness, and then, with a flash of light, it disappeared into the void, heading straight for the heart of the enemy. The Indomitable sliced through the void, its engines burning hot against the darkness. Every system on the ship was running at peak efficiency. There was no room for error. If they were spotted too soon, it was over. No second chances, no reinforcements. Just one human warship against an armada built to erase them from existence. "Commander." Elliot West stood at the center of the bridge, watching the tactical display. Their target was dead ahead, the heart of the Vornak fleet, a supermassive dreadnought at the center of a swirling storm of warships. It was like a spider at the center of its web, commanding destruction with cold, calculated efficiency. "Status?" he asked, voice calm despite the storm raging in his mind. Lieutenant Soren, fingers dancing over her console, answered. "Stealth field holding. Running minimal emissions. They haven't seen us yet, but they will if we get any closer." West exhaled slowly. "Then we don't get any closer. Not physically." He turned to Cade, the chief engineer, who was already anticipating the next move. "We're tapping into their comms now," Cade said. "Low-frequency data burst, threading it between their sensor sweeps, and—" The bridge speakers crackled to life. A deep, guttural voice, layered with an unnatural resonance, echoed through the ship. It wasn't Vornak. It was something else. Something older. "You have done well, warborn creatures. Your struggle is noted. But the test is over. Your cycle ends now." The bridge went deadly silent. West's blood ran cold. It wasn't just the Vornak. They had been right. Someone, or something, was guiding them. A force beyond anything they had faced before. Soren's voice broke the silence. "Commander, I've isolated a secondary signal. It's piggybacking off the Vornak transmissions, originating from deep within the fleet." West's jaw tightened. "Put it on screen." The display shifted. At first, it was just darkness, a void within the void. Then, a shape began to emerge. It was a structure. No, a construct. A colossal alien station embedded within the fleet itself, its surface shifting with eerie, liquid-like movements. It pulsed with energy, deep red, veins glowing like the embers of a dying star, and at its center, a presence, a force that seemed to look back at them through the screen. "We see you." The ship shook. Not from an external force, but from something deeper, like reality itself had bent for a fraction of a second. Alarms blared. Soren gripped her console. "Commander, something just scanned us. They know we're here." West reacted. Instantly. "Full power to engines. Evasive maneuvers." The Indomitable lurched as its thrusters fired, spinning into a sharp escape vector. But it was too late. The Vornak fleet moved, not sluggishly, not like before, with precision. They had been fast before, but now they were impossibly coordinated, like a single mind controlling a million bodies. Fighters, cruisers, battleships, all shifting in perfect harmony, closing in around the Indomitable like a steel fist. A trap. Incoming. Fire! The first wave of plasma bolts screamed past, barely missing the ship. The second wasn't so forgiving. The Indomitable rocked as its shields took the brunt of the assault, sparks showering the bridge. "We can't outrun them!" Cade shouted. West knew it. They weren't supposed to escape. They were supposed to die here. Unless... His mind raced. The construct, the thing controlling the fleet, was the key. If they couldn't run, they had to. "Strike!" "Soren," he barked. "Get me firing solutions on that station. Now." She hesitated. "Sir?" "You heard me. Now!" Her fingers flew. "Locking on. But Commander, our weapons can't punch through that thing's defenses. It's built to withstand..." "Then, we overload them." West turned to Cade. "What's our reactor output?" Cade's eyes widened. "You're not suggesting... Can we do it?" A pause. Then a grim nod. "If we divert all non-essential systems and force a power spike through the main cannon, we might get one shot." "One shot is all I need," West said. The way. Crew worked fast. The ship groaned as energy was siphoned from every system. Life support, shields, engines. Everything was thrown into a single, concentrated burst of raw destruction. The construct at the heart of the fleet seemed to react. Desperation. How human. The enemy fleet closed in. West stood firm. "Target locked," Soren called out. He raised his hand. "Fire!" The Indomitable roared. A beam of pure, white-hot fury erupted from its main cannon, cutting through the void like a blade of light. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the construct shuddered, its surface cracked, its pulsing veins went dark. And then, detonation. The shockwave ripped outward, tearing through the surrounding fleet like paper. The Vornak warships, once coordinated, suddenly faltered, losing their synchronization, spiraling out of formation. A chain reaction. A collapse. West didn't waste a second. "Soren, get us the hell out of here." The engines reignited. The Indomitable shot through the chaos, dodging debris, slipping past the burning wreckage of what had once been an unstoppable force. And then, silence. Space stretched around them. No enemy fire. No pursuit. The fleet was in disarray. They had done it. Against impossible odds. Against overwhelming power. One human ship had faced annihilation and turned the tide. West exhaled. His crew sat in stunned silence. And then, Cade laughed, breathless. "Holy hell, we're alive." West allowed himself a small smile. "Yeah, we are." But as he looked back at the battlefield, at the wreckage of the construct, a thought lingered. This hadn't been a victory. Not yet. The Vornak would return, and whatever force had been controlling them was still out there. Watching. West straightened. Set course for Earth. We need to warn them. This war isn't over. The Indomitable turned, engines burning bright, as it vanished into the stars. The galaxy had expected an army, but one human ship had proved them wrong. And next time, humanity would be ready.